In this video, we are going to look at designing a pond for our highway here. Now, there's a few things that need to take place before the pond design occurs, but I'll only briefly cover them. We don't really have time to get into it. Now, when we design a pond, we need to make sure it has adequate storage for our stormwater. And the way we go about figuring that out is on the Government of Canada's website. There's what's called rainfall intensity data. Now, the city would tell us, okay, we need to design for a 1 in 5 year storm or a 1 in 100 year storm. And then we can go to the website, we can get the data for that 1 or 5, 1 in 100 year storm, whatever is the requirement. We could figure out the contributing area, so how much area of land is flowing into our pond, what different kinds of soil are on the ground, if it's grass, if it's asphalt, if it's gravel, etc. Each one has a different number for how much water will basically soak in, how much will go to the pond. Now, again, with the intensity data, with the area, with the imperviousness of the soil, we can figure out how much volume our pond actually needs to hold. Now, we don't have time to figure that out, and really on this kind of a surface that we have here, basically LiDAR, it's really difficult to figure out the contributing area. So the one that I've come up with is about 1.5 million square meters. So 1.5 million square meters, which is a lot of area, but we're just going to design a pond to hold roughly 10,000 cubic meters of water. Now, the second thing that needs to take place is we have to locate the pond. So we have our road here. Where's the best place to put a pond? Now, generally somewhere flat and somewhere that doesn't encroach on people's property, people's land. I'm going to freeze my existing points off here so we can just get a better view. Now, using the air photo, so geolocation, map, aerial, using the air photo, we can actually see what is kind of being built, what's being built and where it has been built, so we don't put a pond over someone's house. Like if we design the pond down here, it's going to take up a whole bunch of people's houses. If we put the pond, say, up here, there's nobody's house here. There's houses close, but we can make sure we don't really encroach onto them. So we've got our area here. I'm just going to mark it with a circle. As I'm going to turn the air photo back off, it's a little bit hard to see. Map off. Okay, where did my circle go? There we go. So I'm going to design the pond roughly in this area here. Now, we need to ensure that water from our road makes its way into the pond. Now, that would involve 2 or 3 more sets of grading objects, 2 or 3 more sets of calculations, 2 or 3 more sets of layers of grading that can possibly go wrong. There's my original circle. So we don't want to really add too much more to our pond. We'd have to design a ditch. We'd have to design an inlet into the pond. We'd have to design an outlet from the ditch into our new ditch. So I'm going to build the pond down here, and just looking at the contours, if we go 1134, 1132, 1130, this water all flows downhill, which helps us out. So water can come off our road, down the hill, into the pond. In this case, we don't really need to worry about a high water level. We'll probably just place it at existing ground and build our berms up. But in real life, you will need to figure out the elevations of your ditch over here. You have to design a new ditch from the ditch to the pond at maybe 0.5%, maybe 1% slope. And where that elevation of the ditch comes into the pond, so if I just draw a line here, and give me a second. Okay, I had to turn off O-snaps. O-snaps on a surface and with lots of line work around is intensive on the system and it causes lag. So if we were to figure this out just quickly, to draw a line from here to approximately where our pond would be, that's about 620 meters from the length of the line. Now that is how long an additional ditch would need to be in order to have water flow from the road to the pond. So we would need to figure out the elevation of the ditch over here. We'd have to run the calculations at 620 meters long at 0.5%, maybe 1%, to figure out the elevation over here. Now, because of this big slope, we would just follow along with the slope. It'd be greater than 1%. But then we get down here, we'd have to go back to 1%. So whatever that ending elevation is of this line, that is what your high water level would be, or just below it, if we want to add some freeboard. 0.5 meter of freeboard, 0.6 meters of freeboard. So there's a lot more we could be doing in order to design this, but it just adds more complexity, more pieces. Again, the same workflow that we're going to go into for the next few videos will govern how to design a ditch and design the inlet into the pond. It's roughly the same steps. Okay, so the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a few sites. Now, from my previous video, sites are very important. So I'm going to make all the sites I need right now, so we don't have to worry about it later. Pond floor. I'm going to name one. Pond berm. Pond sump. Pond forebay. And finally, pond high water level. Now, if you had the ditch and the inlet into the pond, you would need sites for those as well. But first of all, we're going to start by drawing a rectangle. So to hold about 10,000 cubic meters, we need a pond that's about 100 by 100 meters and about 1 meter deep. Now we're going to have to adjust the depth to account for side slopes and whatnot, but we can start off. I'm just going to turn my draw back on. We're going to start off drawing a rectangle, and I'm drawing it in this relatively flat spot, and the dimensions, I'm going to make it about 100 by 100. And I'm just going to move it into place and possibly rotate it a bit, just so it lines up a bit better here. And again, try and get it in the flat spot. The rotation doesn't really matter. So this is going to be the start of my pond floor. Now we need to go up to grading. We have to create a feature line from an object. So we got our rectangle. This is going to be the bottom of the pond. It'll be the pond floor square here. We need to turn that into a feature line and then get elevations on it. So I'm going to select my feature line. I'm going to hit enter. And very important, make sure you put it on the correct site. So I'm putting this one on the pond floor. And I'm going to make this one, again, we have a whole bunch of different options for styles. Now the reason the styles are here is so we can build all these parts separately, combine them together later. And different colors of lines mean different things. Just keep things separate, keep things in your drawing organized. So for now, I'm going to make these just the floor cyan colored. EDD feature line cyan. We're automatically making a layer. I want to erase existing entities to keep my drawing clean, so get rid of this polyline after it makes it a feature line. I want to assign elevations next. So I'm going to click OK, and up comes the Assign Elevations dialog box. Well, where do I want to pull these elevations from? We only have, well, we've got 4 surfaces in here now, but only one really where our pond is going to be. I want to drive an elevation from my existing ground. I want to see what the elevation is here. Then I will lower my pond floor, maybe a meter, meter and a half from there. Now this insert intermediate grade breakpoints, be very careful using this. Every time Civil 3D has a triangle that the surface will cross, it will create an intermediate point. It will lead to drawing slowness, it'll lead to grading issues, you'll have more trouble grading. So again, be very careful with this option. We're not going to select it. Now I'm going to click OK, and my line has been turned into a feature line. So I'm going to save the drawing, and again, saving is very, very important when we're grading. So now that I have my feature line, let's see what the elevations of the floor are. or the existing ground. So I'm going to select it, right click, go into Elevation Editor. Bring the dialog box over, and we see that the ground is roughly 1118.232, 562, 665. 1118.5 is our rough elevation. So let's go and make these 1118.5, just to give us a starting basis. Now we need to ensure that the pond floor slopes. So again, your feature line may be drawn slightly different. You need to pay attention to which way the triangles are going, which way the grading is happening. And if you take a look over here, we can grade back or grade ahead. Now it's generally easier to grade ahead. You can see where your line's going, what's happening. They've reversed these to grade back, grade ahead. Grade ahead used to be over here 2 or 3 versions ago. So again, pay attention to which direction your line is going. Just because I click on station 100 and my line's over here, does not mean your station 100 is over here. Your 0 may even be over here. So just again, pay attention to where your stations are. So from here to here, I've gotten straight across, slope of 0. My station 200, now I want to provide positive drainage. So from 100 to station 200, I want to slope down at 2%, which drops this one to 1116.5 from 1118.5. From station 200 to 300, I want to grade ahead at 0%, which gives me a slope of 2% from 3 to 4. Now we can't actually see what's happening. We don't have a surface built, which we're going to need one anyways. So let's go ahead and make a surface. I'm going to name it pond floor. I'll leave it on design half in 0.1 and click OK. I'm going to set this to rebuild automatic. Now again, be careful with rebuild automatic. If you have too many things updating at once, it's going to cause a problem. So my surface is made, my feature line is made. Let's select the feature line, right click, add to surface as a break line. I'm going to add it into my pond floor. I'm going to click OK, accept all the defaults, hit OK again. Now we see that we have a surface. It's a flat bottom, one plane flows to the northeast. Generally they'll put a V in it, so it'll be a V slope floor, the low point will be in the middle, and then it'll slope all to the northeast. So let's go ahead and do that. So under the grading, edit feature line geometry, we want to insert some PIs. Insert point of intersection. Now, command line says select your object, so I'm going to select my feature line. And as you notice, wherever I click, it will add a new PI. So if I click out here, it's going to add in a PI out here. It's going to modify my feature line to be way out here. We don't want that to happen. We want a simple little V in our floor here. Now you may get a display issue where this happens. So even though I'm hovering here, it's connecting to the bottom right. If I click, it's still going to triangulate with this one. So that is not an overly large deal. Just click here, it'll still insert a proper one. But the first one I'm going to insert is in the midpoint right here. Specify my elevation. I'm just going to accept the default, hit enter. The second one I'm going to add is on this end. Select the midpoint, and we've got a problem here. So it wants to snap up to 5592. So let's just go type in 1118.5. That's my high side. So that should fix that issue. So I got my 2 PIs put in, and as you notice, they have now modified the panorama here. So instead of the 5 lines we had before, we now have 7. So again, be very diligent when you're grading ahead, grading back. Pay attention to what is happening. So from 0 to 50, we want to slope down at -2. You notice the surface updates. Then I want to slope back up at 2% from 50 to 100. From 100 to 200 down at -2. From 200 to 250, -2. So I've now defined a V-bottomed pond bottom surface. So again, I'm going to save my drawing. And then we'll take a quick object viewer of this. Expand it a bit, and you can see that all the water will flow to the center trench and down to the bottom. So it goes 2% horizontally, 2% vertically, we'll just call it that. So 2% into the trench, 2% into the bottom. So we've now derived our pond floor. We need to drop it, we're going to say 1.5 meters. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to select this little edit button, we'll go 1.5. And then I'm going to drop the entire floor 1.5 meters. Now again, be careful when you're clicking on this that it doesn't just drop 1. So all my numbers have changed. It's now 1.5 meters deep. So we have our pond floor. The next step we want to make, or we want to do, is to derive our pond berm. So I'm going to use under the grading, edit, feature line, geometry, I believe. We're going to do a stepped offset. So the top of the berm we want to make 3 meters wide, and we want to put it about 2 meters above the floor. So we need to do a couple things to keep our drawing clean here, but our offset distance I'm going to make 1.5. I want to offset my floor feature line into the center of the pond, and I want to raise it by 2 meters. Now this feature line is still on the floor site, and it's still the floor color. So let's go ahead and change that. So I'm going to select my feature line, right click, move to site. I'm going to put it on my pond berm. Click OK. And then I'm going to change its color. Then I'm going to come into select a feature line, right click, feature line properties. I'm going to change this one to green. Again, just to keep things in your drawing separate. So now we have two feature lines. These two don't interact with each other. They're on different sites. This one is about 2 meters above this one. So let's go and start grading. So we're going to create a grading object. So under grading, we're going to create grading. Up brings a grading dialog box. Let's run through it quickly, all these options. So set the grading group, and we'll be using most of them. Set your targeting surface. Set the grading layer. Again, the layer is automatic. Choose your grading criteria set. A drop down with various options, and they will change based on the criteria set. So if you go to elevation, these ones change to elevation. Surface, these ones will change to surface. Drop down, this is to create new grading criteria. This drop down, so we can create our grading, create transitions, create infills. We'll be playing around with a couple of these, maybe one. Edit grading, delete grading, change your grading group. Volume tools, surfaces, grading editor, elevation editor, grading group properties, grading properties, and finally this little hiding arrow. So if you ever see this as hiding additional options, this will just show you what you've selected and how things are being displayed, designed. So it has your targets, your grades. You can't change any of these really. Some of these are modifiable, but they're locked by the style. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grade 3:1 to surface. Now 3:1, 5:1, the city of Calgary will tell you exactly what slopes they want. Below the water level, above the water level. In order to keep this simple and not introduce too many different grading objects into our drawings, we're going to choose one, and we're going to stick with the one. So let's go 5:1. We might have to change that to 3:1 later, depending on our side slopes. Cut slope, fill slope, those are all correct. And there is a little bit of a bug where the display of stuff is a little bit wonky. Just close and reopen the dialog box if you get too many issues. So the first thing we need to do is set a grading group. So under my pond berm, I want to create a grading group, and I'm going to name it the exact same as my site. So this is the pond berm grading group in the pond berm site. I'm not going to select any of these options. I'll paste everything together later. I'm going to select OK. My targeting surface. Now when I create my grading, I want it to target a surface. I want it to target the pond floor in this case. Other options we'll have later in the video is the existing ground. So for now I'm going to select my pond floor. I'm going to click OK. Again, display issues, group is not showing up here, but we're going to create grading now. 5:1 to surface, create grading. Site, I thought I selected this, pond berm. Grading group, I thought I made these. Pond berm. Refresh. Okay, let's see what happens. I might need to restart. Yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to restart my grading, so I'm going to pause the video for a sec. Alright, so I had to completely restart Civil 3D in order to get this to work now. So let's see if it works. We're going to grading, create grading. I'm going to set my site up pond berm. Create that grading group again, pond berm. And as we see now, it's now populated into the sites here. My surface, pond floor. Grade slope 5:1 to surface. Create grading. So I'm going to use my green feature line here, my pond berm feature line. I want to grade to the inside. Apply to entire length. In this case, yes. Cut slope 5, fill slope 5:1. So what that means is it goes over 5 meters, down 1. Over 5 meters, down 1. Now the one thing we didn't do in this feature line for the pond berm is set the elevations. So it's creating just kind of a square for us, which we don't really want. The top of a pond is never sloped. It is always one flat, consistent slope. So I'm going to select my pond berm feature line. I'm going to right click, elevation editor, and I'm going to pick the highest elevation, click the first one, select the last one, change them all to 1119. And as you see, my grading has updated. And it does indeed look like 5:1 might be a little too much. So let's go ahead and change that. So I'm going to find my little white diamond, the little glyph for the grading. Select it, right click, grading properties. Sorry, not grading properties. Edit grading. Grading editor. And I'm going to change these to 3:1. Cut slope up. Fill slope down. So I've changed them both to 3:1. Now this gives us a little bit more water level. So the next step, I've got my one piece of grading here. And again, save often. As you just saw, there's bugs in Civil 3D with grading. Things happen, things corrupt, things crash. I'm going to create another surface. I'm going to call it my pond berm. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to select my green feature line and my blue grading line. Do not select the perpendicular line, select the end result. Right click, add to surface as a break line, pond berm, OK. And I'll click OK again. So now if I look at this in Object Viewer, we now have a defined basin. Now that's quite exaggerated. I believe it's 5 times, maybe 10 times. For this next step, we need to turn that exaggeration off. So select your surface, edit surface style, contours, 3D geometry, and I'll just go use surface elevations, triangles, use surface elevations, OK. So this next command they've removed from the drop downs, they've removed from the menu bar. It is available in the ribbon, but the command is stage storage. So we're going to see tentatively how much water this pond holds for now. So it does work off the triangles, it does work off the exaggerated surface, so that's why we unexaggerated it. and it does work off your contour lines. So the more contour lines you have, the more accurate this command will be. I believe ours are every 0.1 meters. For this, that's accurate enough for right now. So type in stage storage. We're going to define our basin from an entity. Define basin from surface contours. Define. We'll select the berm contours, and it spits out this dialog box. So all our contour elevations with the areas of them. And then it gives you a cumulative volume. So from the bottom of our pond, 1114, to the very top, 1119, that is 5 meters deep. We can hold 26,000 cubic meters. But the top, give or take half a meter to a meter of a pond, we can't really hold any water. That's for freeboard, that's for additional storage, just in case. So if I say select 1118, we're down to 17,950. Now this is a little bit higher than we wanted, so we can go ahead and modify. So I'm going to cancel this. And I'm going to, let's get the outside berm built first, and then we'll decide what we want to do for raising or lowering. So under grading, create grading. The first thing I want to do though is send this surface to the back so I can select the feature line. Now, if I was to use a grading object to grade the outside of this pond, I'll just do it quickly. Don't follow along with this. Projection at distance, 1% to distance. I want to grade from here to the outside. Apply to yes. Distance 3 meters. Slope of 0. It will create a rounded transition. Now, they don't build things round in real life. We need to create a square here. We need to square this off. It can't be round. So I'm going to use the delete grading command. So delete grading. I want to delete that one. Hit enter. Now again, do not undo. Don't use the regular delete command. There's specific grading delete ones that keep your drawing clean. So in this case, I'm simply going to do an offset of 3 meters. This line to the outside, enter. You could do a stepped offset with no elevation change. Both commands are the same. These two are still on the same site, so I can go move to site and check that. Selected objects, pond berm. They're the same elevation. I didn't offset at any elevation. But I want to change this to projection to surface. Okay. I'm going to change my surface to existing ground. Okay. And then I want to create grading. So I want this feature line to the outside. Entire length, yes. Cut grade. And it looks like I didn't change the percentage. So 5 to 1 is 20%. Fill grade 20%. And this will create a feature line on the outside. So it looks like our entire pond is above ground, slightly above ground. That's perfectly fine. We're going to now select this final grading line, this pond line, and add them to our surface as a break line. Pond berm. So this will define the rest of the pond for us. The pond berm. So I can object viewer this now. And we have a completed pond berm. Now the stage storage command won't work for us anymore. So we're going to have to go about getting an elevation a different way for our high water level. So I'm going to rebuild my pond berm. I'm going to create another surface. I'm going to name that pond high water level. And again, the style doesn't matter. We're not really going to see it. And there's two ways you can do this. We can create another feature line for our high water level, drop it a meter based on the top of the berm. And then if we change the top of the berm, we have to adjust it. But there's another way here. So I know we made the site for the pond water level, but we're not going to be using it. So I'm going to select this inside berm feature line. I'm going to add this to my pond water level surface. Pond high water level. So this feature line is now a part of two surfaces. If I modify this feature line, it will update my berm, it will update my high water level surface. Right now, this feature line is sitting at the top of my berm. We need to drop this a meter. So under the pond high water level surface, I'm going to expand it. I'm going to expand definition. I'm going to right click edits, and I'm going to raise or lower this surface by -1 meter. And then I'm going to set this to rebuild automatic. So I've got my pond high water level now. It's not visible because it's entirely flat, but if I select this, object viewer it, see if we can see anything. Conceptual, no, nothing is able to be seen because it is entirely flat. So let's see if I can change the style here quickly to make it visible. Model, major, minor, let's turn triangles on for the model. That should render it visible. Select it, object viewer, come back, and there's our high water level. So if I select both surfaces now, object viewer, so my berm and my high water level, we should see that high water level surface cut through the pond, and there it is. And our pond is still down below. So let's check the volume of this now quickly. We'll use the command report surface volume. Again, this used to be in the menu bars, they've removed it. I'm going to create a new volume entry with this button here. My base surface, I'm going to set it for my pond berm. Now, base surface, think of it as your original starting surface. If we were comparing existing ground, it'd be existing ground to something else, our road, for example. The comparison surface I want to compare it to is my pond high water level. So when I compare my pond berm to my pond high water level, I'm left with a cut. Now there's going to be a little bit of cut for when the high water level is below the berm, but we're going to completely discount that. We're only going to look at the fill number. So right now I can fill in 17,956 cubic meters of water. This is a little bit over the 10,000. So I'm going to go and slowly start raising the floor of my pond. So it can give us an elevation of 10,000. Now I'm going to select my pond feature line. Now you're going to start seeing why we have them different colors. I'm going to right click, and you can go into elevation editor, or we can simply use raise lower. I'm going to raise it by 0.1 meter and see what happens. Rebuild my pond berm surface, and then I'm going to recalculate the volumes, recompute volumes. So this changed it to 17,362. Okay, that didn't make too much of a difference. Let's change it by raise lower. We'll go 0.5 this time. We'll raise it up half a meter. Rebuild your pond berm surface. Sometimes when you're working with grading, it doesn't rebuild. I'm going to recalculate, recompute. Okay, we're down to 14,000. That's a little bit better. Let's raise lower one more time. We'll do another half a meter. Rebuild, recompute, 10,867. So, we also have another issue here that has just came up. So let's go and fix that. So our volume is not entirely correct right now. Sometimes when Civil 3D triangulates the surface, it loses information. So there's no information in the middle to give us this last bit of surface. So we're just going to go and add in another PI, the exact same steps for the floor, here with the same elevation. So grading, feature line geometry, insert PI, midpoint right here of this line, specify elevation 1119, that was our berm, hit enter, and if we rebuild our pond berm surface, that should come back. There we go. Refresh one time, and we still have the same volume. It changed a little bit. So 10,867 I am okay with. That gives us the rough volume that we need. Now, we'll just take a quick look at everything we've done here. So we started with a pond floor. object viewer, we use that pond floor and our existing ground to define our pond basin. Now this one's not very deep, which the city doesn't want ponds overly deep. I think 3 to 4 meters at most. Each one of these green lines on this side is a half a meter. So we got 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. We're about 3.5 meters deep at the far end. And we're about 2 meters deep at the shallow end. So that's creating a pond berm and a pond floor surface. We created a high water level surface as well. And we just recycled the pond berm feature line for that, and then we dropped an additional 1.5 meters. Let's just rebuild this to make sure. We've rebuilt everything. We're holding about 10,000 cubic meters of water. The next video will go into designing a forebay for the pond and a sump as well. Now, as I said in the beginning of the video, if we were to design a ditch and an entrance into the pond, the steps would be really roughly the same. We'd have to define feature lines, put them on different sites, create grading objects, targeting additional surfaces, and then stitch everything together at the very end. But again, that adds 3 more additional pieces that we just don't want to deal with. We don't want to introduce all those additional chances for errors into our drawing. We use 2 different methods for getting water volumes: stage storage and report surface volumes. Now, we can't run stage storage on this pond now. It needs to be just the inside of a basin, so the inside of a bowl. We cannot have anything defined on the outside. This contour is the same as this contour elevation. And when we run stage storage, it will take into account the outside contours. It'll get messed up with their areas. It'll give us incorrect information. So that's why I reverted to using report surface volumes. Besides that, you can update this on the fly. Now, the stage storage is good if you just want to look quickly and see, okay, this elevation gives me my 10,000 cubic meters, so I can build my pond off here. Again, it's all just different various little tools to make designing a little bit easier. Now, I know I said that there's no circles, rounded parts when you're designing things. We can go ahead and make these squared off. I'll show you how to do that for the forebay, and the same steps will still apply. Now, another thing that I like to do when I'm completely done my design is explode all of my grading. Now, we'll get into that when we do the forebay, but that is a good idea to get into, a good habit to get into. Explode your grading. It'll turn everything into 3D polylines, but you just put it back on the same site, re-add it back to the surface, and it accomplishes the same option. Whether it's a grading object feature line or a feature line, regular old feature line, the regular old feature line is going to be more stable than a grading object. Now, again, I've lost drawings due to grading objects, and it's purely workflow related when that happens. So again, in this video, we created 3 surfaces. We created a pond floor, a pond berm, a pond high water level. We defined all our sites. We gathered volumes. We used a couple different tools for getting volumes. And again, if you need a little bit more volume, you can lower your floor a little bit, which I might do regardless, because we're going to lose some fill when we do we're going to lose some water when we design our forebay. So we might have to go adjust that again a little bit more. So that will be in the next video. We design the forebay and the sump for the pond.